am so happy that you have decided to join me for my first Conscious Musings with Alexis and Friends. Thank you so much for being here. And I have to tell you, this is going to be a little different because I'm used to being the interviewer. We were just saying offline, and you being the guest. But today we're just chit-chatting, and we get to bounce some ideas off of each other, and other people get to peek in on what's happening. So welcome to my home.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So we're going to talk about something kind of cool here. Something I think you know a little bit about, out-of-body experiences. After all, you're world renowned, right? I mean, you just continue to go, Bill, and I applaud you. Let me just say up front for everything that you have done to bring the importance of out-of-body experiences to the masses. This isn't just a casual thing, fun thing to talk about. This is maybe a critical step in our evolutionary process, right? Self-initiated OBEs.
I think it is our evolutionary cycle and direction because people forget that everyone without there's no exception. We're all moving beyond the body.
That's right.
So why not know about the subject matter and about this important direction that we're all headed on?
That's right. I agree with you. And that is really sort of the theme that I bring about in my book, Conscious Musings, which this little chat is based on. So we're going to be talking about a particular chapter of which you are prominently featured. But I thought it would be very helpful to let the audience peek in on this discussion, kind of an elaboration on what I was trying to convey in the book. This, of course, is a three-part book, but you're a part of the metaphysics of potentiality, the magic mystery and metaphysics of potentiality, and out-of-body experiences to me are right up there. So I don't know. I thought I'd start with a little story that I know you're familiar with because you read the book. Um, and it's called, well, of course, the chapter is called Exploring Non-Physical Realms in the Out-of-Body State. So I figured what I'd do is read this little story. This is a true story of a good friend of mine who experienced an OBE spontaneously, and then I'd like to have you elaborate on it. We can kind of chat about that. So here we go. Sabrina, not her real name, was 18 at the time, her sister a few years younger. Their parents were away for the weekend, so the two decided to pair up and sleep in their parents' bed while they were gone. As the younger sister lay fast asleep, Sabrina felt particularly agitated and restless. Resorting to counting sheep, she stared intently at the ceiling, hoping she would eventually doze off. All of a sudden, Sabrina was looking at her sister from a different vantage point. From the very ceiling she only seconds ago found herself staring at while counting her way into the sleep state. She says, quote, "Not only was I looking down like I was on the ceiling, I actually felt like I was many feet higher than the ceiling. I could see her face. I'm sorry, I could see my sister sleeping on her side as she always did, and next to her was me. I had this strange detached feeling from the girl laying on the bed, and yet I knew it was me. But this was the me looking at both of us from above. It scared the absolute crap out of me," she said. "I was disoriented and absolutely terrified. It was so quick. The moment I thought I was realizing what was going on, I had the sensation of falling. I felt a thump, and before you know it, I was back in my body. I'll never forget it." All right, Bill, what's happening here?
Well, that's a very common experience. Most OBEs, out of body experiences, are spontaneous to begin
Mm-hmm.
with. And just so that viewers know, it's not about trauma. Most of these experiences have nothing to do with physical trauma. They are just spontaneous, where someone will suddenly find themselves floating, lifting, falling, whatever, however they perceive it, moving away from their body. And sometimes they observe, like Sabrina did in your story, which, by the way, is a great depiction of what is so commonly experienced worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
They're brief experiences, and people suddenly find themselves observing their reality from a whole different perspective. This is a classic out of body experiences, and I like to add that based on the research I've done, it's the younger people have these quite often up to the age of puberty, and then the experiences seem to subside to a degree. And I think this is because younger people in general, whether they're 5 or 10 or whatever age, they're more open.
Sure.
They're not as indoctrinated to matter, to their physical body yet, and they're just a little more open to it. And I'd like to add one other thing just briefly.
Yeah.
In a sense, when she counted down, or however she counted, in a way she was doing a kind of self-hypnosis.
So you're saying that as she was counting sheep, she was actually, because you hear that,
Yeah,
especially
she
kids hear that.
was.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
she was in a
interesting.
sense initiating her own altered state of consciousness by doing. This is what I do in my workshops. I do countdowns. That's
Count sheep?
it,
Being funny.
well, not
Wow.
of sheep, but I have countdowns are a common part of putting people into a nice, relaxed, and then into it allows. It's called deepening.
Yeah.
It's a way to deepen the state of consciousness of the individual so they can open up and go inward. And
And
in a way, when you said that, it hit me that she was starting to do her own kind of self-induction,
that's right. I
possibly.
think you're absolutely right. Well, I've obviously read a great deal of your work, and you're right. You're very adamant about that process of a counting down. And I think you use several different approaches, but I think you're right. An epiphany here. Well, I want to mention something about Sabrina. As I said, she's a dear friend of mine. And, Bill, we have talked about this experience so many times. These things still never cease to amaze me. And I love it when you hear it from somebody that's not in this work. This is somebody that is just I don't want to say normal. Nobody's normal. Everyone's extraordinary, but she's not in this work. She's,
Yeah,
an everyday person that had this experience that she didn't ask for. But fortunately, she's an inquisitive person, and I can't tell you how many times we have spent talking about this and other, um, sort of extraordinary experiences. She is aware of your work, and she would love. I will maybe talk about this a little later. You do a lot of teaching at the Monroe Institute, and she's like, "I'd like to go see Bill and do this, maybe do a workshop," because she's interested. Even though she said she was so. I mean, you can imagine, so frightened. What on God's green earth is happening? How can I be looking at me and my sister? And I remember her saying to me, the ceiling at the time, and I remember her family home, I don't know, maybe 8 feet high. But she said that when she was looking from that vantage point, it was like the sensation is that she was 50, I don't know, 30, 40 feet higher than the existing ceiling. But the features of she and her sister were very clear. And I remember she told me she went, and as soon as she went, she felt a thump and she was back in her body.
yeah.
So,
Most of these experiences are very brief at the beginning because people are shocked by them. It's a natural response.
right.
And the more you learn about it, the more you can kind of train yourself to stay calm and prolong the experience if you choose to.
Sure. Yeah. Well, speaking of choosing to, I have to tell you a little, I think you may have read this in the chapter as well. I include quite a few different instances with your analysis tying everything together. But I've had a couple of experiences. Well, I've had a lot of different experiences, but one that I would say is probably closest to an OBE experience, I think. Well, there are two, but this is the one I wanted to talk about. Um, when shortly after my husband and I married, we moved to New Jersey, and my mother at the time was still alive. And I remember it was probably within a year after we were married, and I'd come back to the Boston area to visit my mom. And she told me, Bill, that one day she was in her bedroom at her vanity, my room, which ironically is now my husband and I, our room because we took over the family home. But she heard this is what she said, I heard your voice, and you said, Mommy, or I can't remember exactly, but I think it was Mommy. And she said, now this is the key. She said, I wasn't startled. I wasn't frightened, she said. And whenever my mother would say something like, I wasn't frightened, I knew that there was more to the story. Now, let me try to bring this full circle. Simultaneously, I'm in New Jersey, and I remember about that time I had been getting more serious about my practice of meditation. I've been meditating most of my life off and on, but this was during a time that I was meditating quite deeply. And I remember one occasion, I can see it now. I'm sitting on the floor of the master bedroom, my back against the wall. I went into a state of meditation, and all of a sudden I felt some of the things that you talk about that are hallmarks of the sort of the vibration feeling and this beginning of separation that's still to this day so hard to describe. Well, needless to say, despite the fact that I do this work and was at the time frightened as all get up, I ceased it immediately. Now, back to my mother. she's saying to me, I wasn't frightened. I said, something else is going on here. To this day, and even when she told me, I believe she saw me. I have, and there's probably more to the conversation I can't recall. We're going back close to 20 years. But my mother, whenever she say, it didn't frighten me, something else was going on there. Could I have possibly, almost too difficult to measure in time, but could I have possibly left my body and shown up at my home, 250 miles away?
Oh, that is reported. I mean, it is, people do report, not a physical sighting.
No.
People have been known to be, let's just say, very etheric, but still
Hmm.
three-dimensional,
Hmm.
and be noticed and observed by other people. It's especially loved ones, because
Yes.
we go to other people that we're attracted to, or to, in other words, we're drawn to other consciousness that resonates with us,
Yeah.
whoever that may be. So yes, this has been reported through history. Even some earlier, let's just say, monks of the Christian church, even there's stories of them bilocating, so to speak.
Hmm. Yes.
It's the same kind of phenomena, just a little more material. But it's been, yes, it is reported quite. I wouldn't say commonly. It's not as common as an abnormal, or what we would now term as an out of body experience. But I do hear reports of this quite a bit.
Okay. Well, that piqued my interest, obviously putting it in retrospect many years later. I do feel at the time that she saw me. It was more than hearing my voice. I don't know, maybe the voice was so clear that was enough to startle her, because again, I stress when her signal was when she used to say to me, Bill, unfortunately, this was in the last year of her life. She passed shortly thereafter, and she would say to me, I'm not afraid of dying. And I knew what she was really saying is, I'm totally afraid of dying. No, really. I mean, that was almost like her trying to convince herself. So that was kind of a cue to me whenever she say that. It meant that it was pretty overwhelming for her. So that's that. But this whole idea of, and we have heard the term bilocation, and it has been reported in the annals of history that monks would bilocate, and in particular, I'm thinking of oh, what's the what did he call himself? Oh, I can see his face and can't call his name right now. Anyway, it'll come right back to me. Um, would that really though be the same thing as an out of body experience, or similar features? Let's talk
Oh,
about Robert Monroe for a few minutes, and how he was able to travel great distances and see activity going on with people he knew.
yes,
Could they see
and
him though?
generally not. Generally not. It depends on the individual and how psychic they are, really, and sometimes, because remember, there often you'll be, or the individual that's out of body is going to be, what, for lack of a better word, would be out of phase to the physical world. So they may be able to observe you, but you're not necessarily going to see them. And if they do, it may be an outline. It may be just a shadow,
Right,
or it
right.
could be just a voice. But the point is that it's generally not a three-dimensional solid image that would be seen. That's not often reported,
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
but it does happen.
Yeah.
We have to keep in mind that this is a normal. We're not physical beings. We're temporarily inhabiting a body. So our true self is not physical, and that's what people sometimes forget. So it's only natural. These experiences, everything you just talked about, it's all natural experiences.
I
It's one of the
agree.
things I liked about your book. You do a nice overview of a lot of different experiences that people have, so that it gives people, I think it makes people more open when they understand that these are happening all the time
All the
around us.
time.
All kinds of paranormal experiences are happening, psychic experience, premonitions, and everything you have in your book is things that's occurring on a regular basis.
Yeah, you're
And
absolutely
it's
right.
it's just up to, well, recently, let's face it, 50, 60 years ago, people didn't even talk about this stuff.
They didn't.
They
No,
really
barely.
didn't. They were afraid to discuss it because everybody's afraid, oh, I'm going to look weird to my friends. But now people are coming forward and sharing their stories.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
these stories go back to biblical days. It's the same kind of thing. we're non-physical beings, and we will express ourselves in non-physical ways with non-physical abilities.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's a natural, that's what I think is important. And I think you bring that forward in your book quite well, that this is all natural and normal. Let's just become more knowledgeable about it and begin to become open to these experiences, because all of us are psychic.
There's,
Everyone is psychic.
yep. There's no,
It's not
yeah.
some special. Everybody talks about, oh, I have a special gift. You, people that so-called have a special gift are because they've worked on it and developed the gift often.
Yeah.
But everybody, since we're non-physical beings, we all have non-physical abilities.
Well, I just did an interview recently where one of the questions that was asked to me is, are we or can we all become psychic? And I agree with you. I said, all of us, what I say is, not all of us are going to be psychic superstars. We don't know where that proclivity originally comes from. I mean, you look at somebody like, I'm dating myself, but Michael Jordan, superstar, Tiger Woods,
Yes.
we may be able to throw a basketball, but that doesn't mean we're going to become a superstar at it. So I like to say, and we don't know why. Why do some people have more of a predisposition to these things than others? But I absolutely agree with you. And the word psychic can be a little scary, unfortunately, because it's been so commercialized. But for the sake of argument, we'll use that term here. We are innately psychic. We are
Yeah.
innately intuitive. And thank you for bringing up how I try to tie everything together in the book. But here's my real point, Bill, probably the most prominent throughout the book. Whatever is going on right now, we call it a shift. We call it we're on the precipice of an increasing uh, energetic frequency. Something's going on, and I have a feeling that there are a lot of people, whether they talk about it or not, feel it. Something is telling me that if we don't start paying attention to these things, we may not be able to go with this shift. Now, what that means, I really don't know, but I just have an inner sense that the universe, call it God, call it whatever you want, is trying to nudge us to say, I don't know if we can afford to shrug this stuff off anymore. I think it's time to pay attention. Now, that's not to say go, dive in, head first with books and workshops and, 10 hours of meditation. No, as a matter of fact, I'm an advocate of shutting the book down and just getting quiet and contemplating. But I think we're so over, uh, I'm so over, let's just say, I'm afraid what someone's going to think, because I'm sure you have people that come up to you all the time and say, oh, I had this experience, but I've never told anyone before. And I'm laughing going,
Yeah.
everybody says the same thing. And I'm like, if you could perhaps one day tell somebody, what's going to happen? That happened to me too. And someone else, me too. Me too. We have to stop keeping this in the closet. Our survival may depend on it. That's kind of how I
Yeah,
feel.
well, it's important to it because it is, I think it's our evolutionary cycle
Yep.
and our entire future. And that's what people often forget. I mean, where are we headed to? We're headed to a non-physical reality.
Yeah.
And that is, and we have to start to open up and learn about this process, because it is our true evolution. Everybody's
Mhm.
focused on the physical, and the physical, the evolution, like the book Evolution of Species and all this,
Mhm.
which is fine, but the true evolution is an evolution of consciousness.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to really begin to explore. What are we? Where are we going?
Mhm.
And those are the big questions. Why am I here? What's my purpose? And these are the questions we really have to begin to dig deep for
Yeah.
and
And as
explore through personal experience, not just through books.
That's right. Well, perfect segue, because I was going to ask you if you, Bill, because what we're trying to do, what we're trying to accomplish in this book is not just say pay attention, but we have the tools, including self-initiated OBEs, to do many things. And I would love for you to talk about that. Would you be willing to share a recent experience that you went through, which you start off your latest book, Adventures in the Afterlife, with, and how, I don't know whether you did this intentionally or you just happened upon it during out of body experiences, felt it did what? Healed you.
Well, in 2011, I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And while I was bedridden, essentially, and this happened very quickly. It come on very, at least it just instantly, it seemed like to me, but it took, the bottom line is I began to have, after I went through a certain amount of, let's just say, contemplation about it, I had spontaneous out of body experiences. And I had experiences, which I share in my latest book, about being in a healing space, which I didn't self initiate, I didn't create it. I just spontaneously found myself in a white cube or big cubicle type room, about 12 by 12. And I was just floating there and receiving healing energy. And it assisted me. Now, I'm not saying that that totally cured me, because I had physical treatments, I had surgery, um, but it assisted me to heal very quickly, I think. And because I was open to it. It's not anything special. I think we all have these experiences, but most people are just not conscious of them. In other words, I was open to being conscious of this healing process that was occurring. And call it what you will, but it was amazing. And I know that it assisted me in overcoming my cancer.
I'm sure. Yeah.
But these things are, again, these things are not, this isn't, it sounds extraordinary, but it's normal stuff that happens. But most people would perceive that as a dream, possibly. They have a dream of healing, whatever that dream may be.
Even if it was a dream,
It
you're
it doesn't, yeah, it's just our perception of that reality that's occurring. It
right.
doesn't negate the importance of it. It just means it's a different perception. Anyway, that type of experience is also, after I reported that, and I talk about it a little bit in the book, I had other people wrote to me about same kind of phenomena. They experienced it and it manifested in different ways, but they also received healing because they were open and said, "Oh, I had an experience." In other words, people would share with me, "I had experience very similar to what you experienced," and it just seemed to take care, heal my energy body, so to speak.
Right.
And I got over my issue quicker than doctors ever imagined. So these things happen all the time.
They
As long
happen
as
all
we're
the time.
open to them,
That's the
that's the
caveat.
important part.
That's the caveat. We have to be open to it. And again, I say to people, do you realize what we have? I talk about reclaiming our power. I and a lot of other people, we forfeited our power. We're giving it away. We've got to reclaim it. Well, to me, these are the things that we can do. These sorts of things. Not everything, but it's certainly part and parcel of this arsenal that we have to shift our reality, including physical healing. I too have heard many stories, but yours is obviously so profound to me. I use that word a lot. I gotta stop saying profound so much, but I talk to so many profound people. But it says to me, this is not woo-woo, man. This is not novelty, and nor is it something to be brushed aside. Imagine, I don't think the healthcare industry would be too happy about it, but imagine if we get to a point in evolution where, we become afflicted with anything, allergies or something as devastating as a cancer or otherwise, and we have developed our psychic abilities enough to the point where we can at least begin the healing process and make that part of the regimen. I think we're on the precipice of that by the looks of things. If people start to pay attention, right?
By opening up, that's how miracles happen.
That's how miracles happen.
Miracles happen because people open up to the healing within themselves. Throughout history, for thousands of years, people think they've been healed by someone.
Mm-hmm.
But what actually may have happened is they opened up themselves to the potential of that energy healing, because everything is about energy. That's what the shaman have been doing for 10,000 years.
That's
They've
right.
been healing people energetically by moving energy. I mean, this is nothing new. This is
Nothing new.
what has been done in all shamanic cultures around the world.
That's right.
Before modern medicine even existed, some people open and are healed. Some people remain closed and they're not
And they're
healed.
not healed. Yeah.
But I feel that's a dynamic that's happening, because healing always comes from within.
That's right. And perhaps the ailment emanates from a non-physical, so the healing has to happen at a non-physical level, right? We mind-body medicine, that's not new either. We know the incredible work that Dr. Bernie Siegel, among others, have done in
Hmm.
this area of understanding how physical ailments come about. Certainly, there's skeptics that would argue that they begin and end in the body. I'm one that has a feeling that we know that there are many subtle bodies, some of which have been photographed with Kirlian photography. It does exist. Some people call it an aura, whatever you want to call it. And it is well documented that illness, at some points, by some, can be seen, can be identified in that subtle body. And, as you talk about, similar to the dimensions that we may traverse in the out of body state from astral, causal, and et cetera, on and on, so too are these subtle bodies that may correspond with these dimensions. So it would make sense to me that illness begins there, and then instead of going up through the dimensions to a more subtler realm, it's coming down into density until it eventually ends up in the body. So it would make sense to me that really the only way to heal is through these modalities, not with a pill. I'm not saying don't, because I think there's medications that do very good, but I think we have to augment. I agree with everything you're saying and doing. I just, wow.
Yeah, it's everything comes from within. And when a tumor is removed in surgery, what they're doing is allowing room for that healing to to be achieved because that trauma has been removed. And I mean that's just one example. But even I had during in the last few years, I had a surgeon tell me that he because we had this philosophical discussion,
Hmm.
and I was because generally I was surprised, but I actually had a surgeon tell me that said, well, basically he said that he knew that he was just making the conditions. I'm trying to think exactly how he put it, making the physical conditions appropriate for healing to occur.
I love it.
That I
Oh, I
thought that
love
was
it.
well said from somebody that's a doctor that is he's just making it giving you yourself a chance for that inner healing to take place.
Now,
And that's a beautiful way to look at it. I don't know how many doctors look at it that way
was
though.
this your doctor, your primary
Yeah,
physician?
it was one of my doctors. I thought it was quite profound.
I think, see, you said profound too. See, in this work, we just say profound so much because there's just a lot of profound stuff going on. But you know what? You just hit upon something interesting, whether you've thought about this or not. I am such a fervent believer. There's so many things that need to be in sync when you're in the healing process, including the people that you have around you. When you have a physician that is constantly, that has no bedside manner and is just sort of, you know, um, what do I want to say, mechanically going through the process, and moreover, poo-poos alternative, especially if you're not a strong person, you're gonna, and we know that so many people pay attention to everything the doctor says, and that energy is also affecting us.
Yeah.
Conversely, when you have people around you like this physician who said, that makes me feel so good, I am sure that was part and parcel of the healing that you had as well. Oh my gosh,
Oh,
that's,
absolutely, because it would plant a positive instead of a negative.
yes, glass
That
half
that's
full.
the new. I think a lot of the physicians today are more and more aware of that because that's why you don't see as much of this. Um, because my wife works in hospice,
Yeah, you were saying
and
that.
I get
Yeah.
a lot of feedback from, let's just say, end of life situations, because I wrote a book about it. And what I find is that there has been a slow transition, even in the medical community. You don't see as much of these firm statements that 20 years ago they would make these statements, oh, you only have 6 months to live. And now they realize you don't say that to someone. That's a very negative statement because from a doctor's perspective, I mean, you're basically implanting that in the patient's mind that
Absolutely.
you're going to be dead in 6 months. So now because they realize it's like a negative form of hypnosis, and now it's the opposite. Now they go out of their way. That the more modern physicians who have been studying the psychological connection between body, mind, and spirit, they realize that you try to implant positives into the patient, not negatives.
Right, right. I agree. Well, it's ironic because you talk about this edict. You have 6 months to live. Go take your last vacation, etc. And it's encouraging to hear that that paradigm is shifting in terms of the dialogue. But Sabrina, my friend who had the spontaneous out of body experience, excuse me, her father was an oncologist, a cancer surgeon, and he would say, and who was like a father to me, he would say constantly, he was ahead of his time, he's now gone. I will never tell a patient that they, even if the math looks to be, I will never tell them that they have X amount of time to live. It's just not a part of my philosophy. And needless to say, he was brilliant, well respected all over the world. And part of the reason why, aside from just being a brilliant surgeon, is because of that philosophy. He invariably quit the medical profession because he got so disgusted about this sort of, this arrogance, this attitude, this mechanistic model of you got to do it this way or else you'll be sued, all that. He said, I didn't go to medical school for that. So he eventually, got out of the field. This is this woman's, my friend's dad that had that attitude. That was 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's good things are changing. It's just taken a while to get over the old ways of that total focus on just the physical. Those things are slowly changing, which
yeah,
is all good.
that's an excellent thing, and that's why I was moved to do this project, do this book, and do the work that I do with the radio show, etc. Because like I say all the time, it's a big tapestry, and if I can just be a little thread, us threads in the tapestry, we will create a cloth and to help nudge this paradigm shift. So anytime you hear maybe your work or our work is influencing that mindset, it's gratifying because we've got to just help each other. You know, we're going to wind down soon from our conscious musings, but this is something that I think folks are going to want to hear about a little bit in terms of why you think self-initiated OBEs are so important. And that is seeing loved ones that have passed over. First of all, you say something like in the book, I quote this, that you want proof for yourself or evidence that we don't die. We're just infinite. But moreover, that our loved ones don't either. It dawned on me this morning, we look at grief counseling groups and just in general, I'm thinking of the people, the Malaysian flight, right, that they have pronounced has gone down. I think there's still some question there, but let's assume the worst, I guess, until we know otherwise. You got a lot of families that are beyond themselves now with grief, regardless of what happened. Coming full circle again, imagine if we could use self-initiated OBEs to connect on some level with our lost loved ones. Would we not eradicate the grief so much quicker? And don't you think that's important for that to happen?
Well, from a lot of different levels, I think most importantly, we're all on the same evolutionary path. And that evolutionary path is beyond our physical world and our physical body. So the more that we begin to get comfortable with it, the more that we can have what I call an enlightened transition, make this shift of consciousness that we call death in a much more enlightened manner instead of just being fearful. I mean, that's the big block I find. So many people, unfortunately, there's very little information that has been given. There's just hope, and people, there's prayers and hope, but no knowledge, no self knowledge. And through your own out of body explorations, people prove to themselves, for lack of a better word, and this is powerful there, because there's a big difference between just believing in something and experiencing it for yourself.
Absolutely.
That's why I was, one of my most profound experiences was when I met my mother who was deceased.
Yeah,
I
I've
mean,
heard that story.
it opened up a whole new world. I mean, she was beautifully young when I saw her in the out of body state. Even though when she died, she was 72. But when I saw her, she looked like she was 25 and radiantly young.
My mother
But
was
it was
72.
beautiful. And it was moving because it verified
Yeah.
the reality of this to me. Not just books and theory. It was hard evidence. And that's what's important, I think, for people to have nowadays.
Yeah. You said she was 72 when she passed?
Yes,
So was my mother. 72. Wow. Not old, but that's a bit synchronistic. What was your mother's first name?
Laura.
Okay. Mine was Anne. Wow. I think that is pretty, if there's any reason to want to explore, I know it's a little scary for folks, maybe, the idea of maybe even preposterous to some to leave their body, but once one can become somewhat comfortable with the process, then there's so many applications. There are so many applications, and I think of people that never get over their grief, and especially, I don't know, maybe I was thinking, right after you lose someone, you're just so out of sorts anyway that it may not even be a good time to try something like that. But I think in time, as you calm down, and yet you still may have some trepidation over where are they, and I still ask, where's my mom? I dream of her all the time. But using these techniques, no guarantee certainly, but at least we get a little bit closer to understanding the true nature of reality and ourselves in the process. I just think it's something else. Any last comments in our as we wind down? And I'm looking for something I want to while you talk, I'm going to bend down real quick and grab something here. Any last thoughts?
Well, I enjoyed your book. I thought it was a good overview of a lot of different subjects, and I thought you brought it together very well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, and thank you for being a contributor. You added to the tapestry to make my point. So I hope people will read it and the book isn't that long. As you know, it's about 192 pages, and I did it that way on purpose because, well, A, because our attention spans are so short these days, but B, most importantly, because I am a big advocate of closing the book after a while. And let's get to it. Let's get to these self-initiated OBEs and enjoying our life and realizing our potential. So thank you so much for everything. And we've talked quite a few times at this point. I'm thinking, wow, you're a friend. I appreciate you, and I appreciate your work. And by the way, let's see if I can get this in the shot here. For those that are listening, this is the first segment of Conscious Musings with Alexis and Friends. And as a thank you for tuning in, I hope I can get this in the shot here. We'll have another shot. We're going to be giving away a signed copy of Bill's latest book, Adventures in the Afterlife, along with a signed copy of my book, Conscious Musings. And official announcement will start as we do subsequent segments. I hope we can do more of this, but here's what you do, and I'll have this typed out for you as well, and you can click on the link. But all you have to do is go to Conscious Musings at higherjourneys.com, put in the subject line Conscious Musings 1, one word, Conscious Musings 1. You don't have to put anything in the body of the email. I just need to, you know what, put your name, actually. We will not share your email with anyone, I promise you. And we will be drawing one winner to get both a copy of Bill's book signed and a copy of my book signed in April. And there will also be a link where you can look at the official rules if you need to get the fine print. So please do that. Thank you so much for giving us a copy of the book, and I can attest this book it's unlikely. When I opened this book, I didn't expect that this was going to be. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to let people see it. I didn't expect it to be what it was. Let's just say it's an unexpected surprise, everyone. It's great though. It's great. I think I actually read it twice. Did. I know I went through it once and I was like, wow, this is wild. And because we know each other, I said, I bet you I know where he's going to go next with this. Adventures in the Afterlife. It's awesome. So,
Well, thank you.
William Buhlman, thank you. It's been fun chatting with you.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah. How's the weather down there in
Cold,
Maryland?
cold in Maryland.
It's cold here too. Really? Are we going to get past this? I think it's supposed to go up to maybe the 50s after we get a blizzard tomorrow or tonight. Yeah. So happy spring. Thanks so much.
Hey, bye-bye now.
Bye.